So I recently watched the Splatoon 3 North American Championship for 2023 at PAX East. Well, I wasn't there, but still. And what I saw was quite entertaining. There were plenty of really high skill moments, along with getting to witness Starburst absolutely demolish the rest of the competition. It was a very good tournament, even in production value. It's something I'm really excited for, as I think it gives really high hopes for this Splatoon 3 competitive scene going forward. Except... now, I am in no way a competitive Splatoon player. I just don't have the time or care to find a team or even put the work in to get that good. So I can't really discuss the meta more than what I, see and what those more knowledgeable than me have said. But with that in mind, I noticed a pattern watching the championship. I think we all saw it. How many vanilla splashes and machines were there? Now, I know metas develop. I know some things are just strong, but the overwhelming number of these two meta weapons, with next to no other weapons, was off-putting. So I decided I would count just how many of each weapon were there, and see if we can't find any patterns, and seeing if my fears that the meta was dominated by one or two weapons were true. So I did, and here are the results. Pretty fancy. Explaining some of these terms, I counted the number of times we saw each weapon at all in any game and on any team. In a game, there might be 4 splashes, and I would count that as 4 splashes. Then there's the game scene, which refers to if it was seen in a round of the tournament. So, for example, we saw 3 E-leaders this tournament, but in one round, both teams had an E-leader. So over 2 games, there were 3 E-leaders. Percent of games is what percent of games featured at least one of these weapons. Percent of total is just what percent of the total possible kits were taking up with each weapon. And immediately, look at the vanilla splash. Just all of it. It was in every single game. 50% of the weapons were splash. 4 splashes per game, 2 per each team. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. There was only one round where both teams didn't bring 2 splashes. The first match between Destiny Bond and Starburst. That's it. There really is no excuse for this. If there was 1 per round, I would still be a bit annoyed, but understand that it's a meta weapon. But come on, for a round, for a game, 2 on each team at almost all times? That's not healthy. Sloshing Machine also had a dominant performance. It was in all but 1 game, I believe, and presented 1/4 of all weapons played. Most rounds with the machine had both sides choosing it, sometimes subbing in more machines for added power. Again, a extremely prevalent weapon, mainly because it, shuts down both Splash and Crab quite hard, and that's what it was mainly used for. T-Tech and Tri-Slosher Nouveau really had a strong performance too, being featured in more than 30% of games each. But the usage rate falls off a cliff. They were only being played by mains, who stubbornly stuck by their picks. And when we saw what could be done with both, I can't help but feel like they might have been better suited with a vanilla splash. 'Cause I mean, it does everything, doesn't it? Reflux had a strong showing with 4 games and 8 uses. This is because every turf game had 2, each team brought 1. I guess that's a part of the meta now. At least it's not another machine. Or a splash. And that's kind of it for statistically notable weapons. Sure, other weapons were played, but most only once, or maybe a few times. And, that's really depressing. Out of all the possible kits a player could have chosen, only 10% of the time were they not one of the other top 5 picks. This becomes dire when you remember that this full list of weapons used in the tournament only represents 20% of all weapons in Splatoon 3. I know meta will cull many weaker weapons, but in a series that already heavily favors meta picks, the fact that only 5 weapons are really meta is bad. And even then, 3 of those weapons are kind of niche and only used by a handful of players. It was almost entirely Splash and Machines. Backliners had a pitiful showing. For how much hype I've seen of backliners and how much more powerful they are than in Splatoon 2, there were only 6 seen in total. None of the backliners were even anywhere close to being meta. Only 6% of all possible kits were backliners, and this includes Squelcher and Heavy, which are notable for the relative freedom in movement compared to other harder anchors. It just doesn't seem to be a very favorable matchup for them. All but one game had either a machine or Splash. 3/4 of every weapon picked were either a machine or Splash. Can you sleep at night knowing these facts? Bottom line, Splash and Machine are far too dominant. They push out everything that doesn't either counter them or is a niche specific strategy that only works on like 2 maps. And I mean, the machine is used mostly to counter Splash and Crab. So really, it's basically just Splash is the meta, Crab is the meta. Either figure out how to beat it, or just don't. I understand that the maps they chose and the modes they chose weren't exactly what we consider the best in the Splatoon community. You know, a bunch of the very choky, very special reliant maps. I think we know enough about the meta. I think we know enough about Splash to understand that it wouldn't have been much different even if we got the best possible maps. Maybe there would have been a bit more variety, but let's not kid ourselves. Map design can only take you so far when we are dealing with vanilla Splash. Why haven't we banned more than 1 kit per team? This would instantly reduce these issues. I get that a meta would develop and certain weapons would rise, but I would not care if a team was running the same thing over and over again. Not only would that not happen, since there was still some variety in this tournament even, but it's better than watching the optimal 2 to 3 splashes, 1 machine, and 1 other potential random pick. Like, having 4 weapons is much better than having 2. And let's be honest, there were only 2 weapons. It gets boring very quickly, and honestly, you could tell even the hosts went into it. Every time an interesting off-meta appeared, everyone got so much more excited. Weren't you more excited? I was. And seeing players main weapons that aren't the meta, like Try and T-Tech, was fun. Give me more of that. Not another 2 splashes. Not another sloshing machine. Something interesting. I'm bored of this meta. It's been so many months. Please Nintendo, nerf Crab and Splash. I promise the game will only get better if you do that. Because like, if we are still in this similar meta next packs, if these statistics don't change, don't improve, don't get more variable, don't widen, I'm not sure competitive Splatoon will survive, much less thrive. And isn't that what we want? And I don't think this is helping. But I guess we'll just have to see.